What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're taking a look at a clip from The Line. If you would like to, please go down below to the description and find a link to The Line and to the live stream that this video clip is coming from. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to The Line. I host over on The Line at least twice a month, so I hope to see you over there. All right, let's get on into the clip. If you're ready to fuck around and find out what this crazy ass caller's talking about today, then please stay tuned.
Yeah, they have. So let's go ahead and talk to Sudhir. Is that right? Sudhir?
That's me.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah, I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Are you outside? What's going on? There's a lot of wind noise.
Yeah. Is that better?
Not real. Can you go not outside? Because it's like real windy and obnoxious.
Okay. Let me find space real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What's going on?
Yeah. So, my claim was that atheism is just as much of a belief as theism is.
Okay. Can I ask you? It's going to sound like this is a silly question, but I promise it isn't. What do you mean by atheism?
Faith in God.
You said atheism is
No. Theism is faith in God.
right. What do you mean by atheism?
A belief that God doesn't exist.
Okay, that's why I asked, because what's really important here is that you can draw kind of like a Punnett square of this, of like theism or atheism is either believing or not believing in a God, and then there's Gnosticism or agnosticism, which is whether or not you know.
Yeah.
So you can be a Gnostic theist or a agnostic theist. Either I believe there's a God and I know it, or I don't know it for sure. You can be a Gnostic or an agnostic atheist. And so what it sounds like you're saying is that atheism is a position that there is no God. And that is a position that some people hold. That is not what we're arguing for. We are arguing for agnostic atheism, which is the idea that we don't believe in such a thing as a God. We do not have any faith in it. We are not claiming for sure that we know that there is no such thing as a God. We're saying unless we have a good reason to believe in a God, we don't. So, like, if I tell you right now that if I've got an elephant in my closet, you can say, yes, there is, no, there isn't, or I don't believe you. Yes, there is, or no, there isn't. Both of those require faith. Both of those require evidence, right? But for you just to say, I don't believe you, you're not saying for sure there is no elephant in my closet. You're saying until I give you a good reason to believe, you're going to go on with your life as if that isn't true, right? That's where we are with God. Until we have a good reason to believe there is such a thing as a God, we're just going to continue on as if there isn't and not believe the proposition. And so that's not a faith-based or a belief-based position. It is the opposite of that.
Yeah, I understand this, but it could go my way too. I could say I'm an agnostic theist. Just because you add agnostic in there doesn't mean like it. I personally don't think it means.
No. Hold on. So dear, you throwing agnostic in there does mean a lot, because it means that you don't know whether or not God exists. You just believe in a God. So it kind of clarifies what you know versus what you believe.
It's also important to point out that if you are a theist of any stripe, if you are a theist at all, you are still making a positive claim that you are believing in a God, whether or not you know it or not. You are still espousing that something does exist. And so that is still an evidence or a faith-based claim that you would need some evidence for. Whereas what we're saying over here is that we're not saying it doesn't exist. We're saying I just don't have a good reason to think that's true. So for the same reason that I don't believe in the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, I'm just not going to acknowledge this thing as a concept until I have a reason to think that it's real. So calling atheism a belief in that way is like calling off a channel on a TV. You know what I mean? The TV is off. It's not on a channel. It's off. And so our beliefs are
that's
not there.
Because the TV's either on and off. And you're telling me, you're giving the premise that it's off. I don't think that's a valid example. What I'm saying is that agnostic, I can say I'm an agnostic theist. If I say that, then your position as agnostic atheist is just as agnostic as mine. So why don't you just accept agnostic? Both of these claims have the same amount of agnosticism and faith in them.
I believe I believe both Forrest and I do classify ourselves as agnostic atheists. We don't know if a God exists or not. We just don't believe in one. Like, what would you call that position if not agnostic atheist?
So, but you default to. So agnostic atheist means you don't know necessarily, but you'll assume that it's false. Is that right?
Yes. I'm okay with that definition, but because that is what we would call the null hypothesis. It is the exact same position that you take on literally everything else. So if someone comes up to you and says, my dad owns the Ferrari company. It's not some big crazy claim like that. You're going to assume they're lying until they give you a reason to demonstrate that they're telling the truth. You're not calling them out. You don't have evidence that that's not true. You're just not going to believe it until they give you a reason to believe it. If they come up to you and say they had McDonald's last night, that's not really a big claim. It doesn't really matter. But a really big claim, like the moon is a spaceship guided by gophers, like that's a big claim. You should just assume I'm lying until I come up with a reason. And that's where it was God. God is a massive claim. And until you give me a reason to believe it, I just don't. It is the default position. It's not like I'm making a faith-based leap here.
Yeah, let me cover a few things that you said right there. First of all, you said it's a massive claim. Like, you can't really differentiate massive claims from claims unless you're talking about some subjective idea. So let's not call it massive claim necessarily. It's just a claim. And secondly, the idea of null hypothesis is a statistical term. It doesn't really apply to proofs as we say, And I would argue, in fact, that the null hypothesis. I would argue, in fact, that the null hypothesis is agnosticism, is not atheism, because you would defer to the fact that you don't know. You not defer to the fact that
why do I have to know in order to not believe in something? Like, I guess I don't understand why those things are like so deeply coupled together. Like, if I don't know something, right, then and I mean, I don't believe it. Like, that seems like two different things. Like, you can not know whether or not God exists, but you could still believe in God. We just simply don't believe in God.
They are different, sure. So the sense that you don't know is agnosticism, and the sense that you don't believe.
Well, hold on. So, Sudhir. So the screener note says that you're called in to talk about how atheists are just as much believers in God as believers are. And now we're squabbling over the definitions of agnostic, gnostic, atheist, and theist. Why do we have to squabble over labels right now? Let's just take the labels out of the fucking equation. Neither Forrest and I know whether or not a God exists, and we do not believe in a God. That's our position. Well, can we move on with the fucking conversation?
I'll be honest with you. The definitions themselves is my entire argument, because those are very important. People tend to ignore them a lot. Just like, because there might be boring.
So the problem with that, please go back. Please go back to wherever you were where the wind noise wasn't, because it keeps getting worse and it's really annoying. But the problem with that is that in common parlance, these words aren't used this way. We are using this really technical definition because we argue this stuff for a living. But in common parlance, people would use the word agnostic as somewhere in between theism and atheism. And though that's not appropriate, that would work for them. So even if we sit here and hammer out these definitions between the three of us, it's not going to get us really anywhere in whether or not this is a belief claim for anybody else. So I think it's really more productive to just talk about what we actually believe and whether or not as a belief or a faith-based thing or a knowledge-based thing, that's fine. But I don't think it's appropriate to get hung up on words like this when we're just, it doesn't mean something to the next person who calls in. John and I don't believe a God exists. You don't, let me ask you, do you believe in UFOs? In like aliens coming to visit the Earth in UFOs? Do you believe that?
Well, I have no idea, but logically what I've come to, and this is not my belief, this is what I've logically come to, is that they probably don't. But it's not a belief.
That's
unlike
a belief.
Right. So what you just said is you've come to this assumption that these things probably aren't real. These UFOs probably are not real, right?
That's what I've logically come to. That's not a belief I hold.
Okay. Right, we're getting there. Just hold on for a second. Okay. So you don't believe these. Is it possible that that's true? That there are actually aliens visiting us? Is that a possibility?
Definitely.
Awesome.
And for anything.
Do you know for sure whether or not aliens are visiting us?
I'll never know anything for sure.
Great. I agree with that. So one last question before we get to the point here is, like, if you had sufficient evidence to demonstrate that aliens were coming to visit us, would you change your mind and say that, yes, that is happening?
I would not believe it still. I would say, now with this new evidence that I have, I could logically come to the not in conclusion that the possibility that they are here in UFOs.
So if you had evidence, you still wouldn't believe, you would just accept it's a possibility?
No, to have belief, by definition, is to have unreasonable faith in something. And just disregard what
I'm trying.
My word faith.
I disagree with that definition, but it doesn't matter. I'm trying to get to the point here. Would you change your mind and say that you believe, know, accept, whatever word you want to use? Would you be in the affirmative position that aliens are coming here to visit us if you had good evidence for it?
If I had to act on it, that's I think that's what you mean by believing. If I were to act upon it,
no, I mean just like, would you take the affirmative position? That's all I'm asking.
I would take it, yeah, if I had to act upon it. So, for example, if the government had to do something about aliens, if they were here or not, right?
It super doesn't matter.
If I was in the, yeah.
The question is not about acting. The question is evidence. So what we've established so far, I'm going to repeat it back, is that as of right now, you don't know for sure, 100% certainty, whether or not aliens are visiting Earth. However, you can use logic and reasoning to say that you don't think that's likely, you don't think that's happening, therefore, you are in the negative position. You're not saying you know, you're just saying that there's no good reason to believe that. If good evidence came along, you would change your mind and take the affirmative position and say, yes, there is a good reason to believe this, so I do accept that this is the case. Is that a fair summary of everything we just said? Not trying to catch up on words.
Yeah, I know where you're going from here. And yeah, I'm not going to...
I would like you to answer the question, not just tell me what you think I'm going to say next.
So what was the question? Yeah, I would change my mind. But let's take that into...
That's not the question. I asked you if what I just said was a fair summary of your position.
It's a fair summary, yes, but it does not show the entire...
Okay.
Yes, I agree with
that. Exactly what you just said, exactly that position that you just said is your position on aliens, exactly word for word the same thing is what John and I believe. Just change the word aliens for the word God. We don't know for sure whether there is such a thing. We couldn't possibly know for sure of whether or not that's such a thing, but we don't have a good reason to believe that's the case. We can logically and reasonably say that isn't the case. If there was good evidence, we would change our minds, but there isn't, so we don't. So we hold the position that there is no such thing as a God, and we act on that assumption until we are proven otherwise. That is not a belief claim. That is not a faith claim. That is logic.
It is. No, because you're assuming that it's not there. So that's your belief.
That's not an assumption.
No, we're
that
not.
is just
We're not
moving forward
assuming.
with the evidence we have.
Yeah, go ahead.
In order for me to act like God was there, I would need evidence that God was there. I don't have evidence that God is there, so I act as if it isn't. That is logical.
We're talking about beliefs, right? We're talking about beliefs.
I can't hear you because you're in a fucking tornado.
Yeah, okay, we're talking about beliefs, right? We're not talking about acting upon.
It doesn't matter.
It kind of does, because that's the
Look,
definition of atheism.
Sudhir, listen. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to put us into a corner where we're making some kind of positive belief that we are then going to have to support. Like, yeah, exactly. You've got a script and you're running your script. I get that.
No,
and so you're trying to paint us. No, hold on. You're trying to paint us into a corner where we're going to have to like justify something other than we just simply don't believe. Right? We just don't believe in your particular God. And for whatever reason, that's uncomfortable for you. Now, we're not going to allow you to shift the burden of proof like this because we're not making a positive claim that we definitely believe like God absolutely does not exist. We hold a softer atheist position of we don't know, but we don't believe in that God or in any God. And so maybe can we move on? We are kind of time boxed here, so we kind of have to get to the point like rather quick.
Yeah, I'll just say my last thing and then we can move on. If you don't want to have a belief, you want to take a neutral stance, then you should be agnostic, purely agnostic.
I'm really not going to have this conversation with you, Sudhir. We've already discussed this, and you're just being a dick right now by telling us how we should label ourselves when we've tried several times to just move past the whole label thing. But the label thing is the only thing that you have.
Also, what's frustrating, Sudhir, is that the first part of this call was hammering out the details of that, the fact that theism and Gnosticism are different concepts, and so they can overlap in different ways. And when you were so hung up on it, I said to you that the problem with this conversation is that someone else is going to call agnosticism this pure intermediary between theism and atheism, and pretend that atheism is hard. I said that to you. And in order to try to get you off of this thing of like digging into definitions so hard, and now you're doing the exact thing that I was warning against us doing. You're saying, well, you guys should be agnostics, not atheists, when that is literally what we have been trying to defend and define for you this whole time. And it sounds to me, Sudhir, like you are more interested in winning an argument than actually having a conversation, because you are now contradicting one of the last things you said. You are going against the beginning of the conversation, against the things that you said at the beginning, in order to still just try to tell us that we're wrong no matter what. And I don't understand why that's okay for you to do. I don't get why you're cool with that. Do you want to bring him back on? What do you want to do?
I'll let him say his final piece, but then we need to move back on. We need to move on.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sudhir, does anything I just said make sense to you?
Yeah, are you the same person? Is this a different person?
Same two people. The beep was us muting your microphone because we could not hear anything. It was just wind noise and you talking over us.
I'll go in this corner. This must be better.
So what you just heard, did you hear what I just said a second ago?
Yeah, I mean, you didn't give me a chance to speak at all. But yeah, we can move on. I mean, most people don't want to have arguments on.
Are you saying we didn't give you a chance to speak?
No, you yourself said you muted me, right? So you didn't give me.
Well, we had to mute your microphone because there's so much wind noise. It's obnoxious. Sudhir, at the beginning of this call, you agreed with us that there's a difference between theism and Gnosticism, and we separated those terms out. And then I warned you that some other people are going to conflate those terms and it's going to be unproductive. So we need to actually just talk about the logic. And now you just did the thing that I said was going to happen and said that we need to be agnostics, not atheists, which is conflating those terms and missing the point. So do you understand where we're coming from at all?
Yeah, no. And what I understand what you did is you just like called out, and I've been only talking logic so far, and so have you guys, but it's like calling out, let's not talk about this logic, let's talk about another logic, because you guys are better at that logic. That's
No,
just
I'm just trying to get
completely.
off of. I'm just trying to get off of this hang up of like trying to define something to death. It really doesn't do us any good. Sadir, we don't believe in your God.
We're defining the topic. We've been productive unless you think we haven't.
Sadir, we don't believe in your God for the exact same reason and in the exact same way that you don't believe in all of the other possible gods throughout time, space, history, and also aliens, and also Bigfoot, and also the Loch Ness Monster, and also fairies, and leprechauns, and unicorns. We're not saying that we don't think those things could possibly exist. We're not claiming to know anything. We're saying that until we have a good reason to believe, we don't. That's the way that you handle every single claim in your life if you're an intelligent thinking person. And that's the way we handle God as well.
Yeah, I told you I handle things differently.
You handle okay. So if I tell you that Bigfoot exists, do you automatically believe me?
You use the word believe.
If I tell you that Bigfoot exists, do you automatically? Hold on. I'm sorry. If I tell you that Bigfoot is real and he's living in my guest bedroom, do you assume I am telling the truth?
I won't assume anything, but then listen. From what I've seen, from how many bedrooms I have seen personally, what I would come to logically is that he's not there. But that's still,
okay.
But that you could label that my belief.
What you just described is our atheism. If you tell us a God exists, logically, that doesn't make any sense to us. It doesn't mean it's not true. I could bring you to my house and show you Bigfoot, and it would prove you wrong. But until we get that proof, that demonstration, we don't believe in the God. That is exactly what we are doing.
Yeah, I agree. And let's move on from this. But at the end of the day, it's still a belief. That's just my point. Let's move on.
Oh my God! No, I'm sorry. We've got to move on from this bullshit conversation. So thank you so much, there, Sadir, for calling in. And
feel free to call back another time I'm on, but we're already running overtime on the show.
Yep. And I really don't. I don't have. I know. I don't have the patience for continuously going around in circles about labels, and just to have some asshole be like, "No, you should really be an agnostic." It pisses me off.
Well, heathens, that's going to be it for today's clip from the line. Again, if you would like to subscribe to the line, their links are in the description, so please go down there and subscribe. And as a reminder, I do host over there at least twice a month on either a Sunday or a Monday. So if you want to see more of me answering questions from callers, please go over to the line and subscribe. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.